Shalom Aleichem. We are in Hilchot Talmud Torah, the Rabbeinu Rambam, Zichrono Livracha, Perek Shishi, Halacha Yod Het or Yod Daled. על 24 דברים מנדים את האדם. There are 24 categories and reasons for excommunicating a person. Ben Ish, Ben Isha. Makes no difference if we're talking about a man or a woman. Well, this is the list. Hamavaza et hechacham, wa'afilo lahar motho. We discussed bizui tamidei chachamim previously. We mentioned in halacha Yud Aleph or Yud Gimel. Over here you can see, and I will share it with you. Here Rambam says, "Awon godol hu levazot et hachachamim or lisna'otham." It is a great sin to either denigrate or to hate hachamim, talmidei chachamim. Lo harava Yerushalayim ad shebizu ba talmidei chachamim. Yerushalayim, one of the reasons for the Hurban was bizui talmidei chachamim. So that's Aleph. Beth, Rambam, I return to the end of the chapter here. Beth over here, Hamavaza Shaliach Beth Din. Shaliach Beth Din is literally a messenger, someone sent by the Beth Din to tell him that he is required to appear before the Beth Din, shall we say, because another person is making a claim against him, let's say a monetary claim, and the Beth Din acts according to Torah law, and that's what we're discussing here. That's the kind of Beth Din we're discussing. And it has authority, and all Jews are required to respect that authority. This is an essential prerequisite for a truly healthy Jewish society, a Torah society. The Beth Din has much power, much authority, a society in which the citizens show respect and treat with respect and follow the instructions of the Beth Din. The first, most basic instruction is to appear before it. It doesn't mean necessarily that you're guilty of anything, but you have to appear before the Beth Din at this point. So if the Shaliach is sent by the Beth Din and the person being called makes light of that person, shouts at him and tells him, "What are you doing here? Go away, I don't want to hear what you have to say," and things of that nature. And obviously what he's doing really is being mevazeh the Beth Din. He is disrespecting the Beth Din. Gimel, hakoreh lahavero aved. If a person calls another person an aved, meaning an aved kana'ani, when this is not the case, then he is casting an aspersion with regards to his yichus. In other words, if this is true, then he and his sons are avadim, and not Jews in the fullest sense. In a partial sense, yes, not in the fullest sense. And this is, of course, great. This could have terrible consequences. So even for just calling another Jew by such a name, one can be put in Herin or Nidui. ד' המזלזל בדבר אחד מדברי סופרים. ואין צריך לומר בדברי תורה. A person who makes light of even one din, one takana, one idea of the Chachamim, ואין צריך לומר בדברי תורה, קל וחומר if we're talking about something which is clearly minat Torah, such a person is hayav nidui. It could be a rather relatively minor thing, although nothing is minor. And as Hazal say elsewhere, divrei sofarim havivim v'divrei Torah. Therefore, this is a very serious matter. So let's say there are people, and it's not always, by the way, as a result of zidzul. It's a lack of understanding, a lack of education. But for example, I am aware of the fact that there are some people who wash their hands for bread, do netilat yadayim, only on Shabbat. Of course, there's no halachic basis, no rational basis for such a practice. I heard this recently, in fact, from a certain woman who said that she was quite shocked to discover that her granddaughter was surprised to see the grandmother, do netilat yadayim during the week. She said, "What are you doing, Savta? Are you going to do that on Shabbat?" Because obviously, unfortunately, in that home, this is what the children saw, what they understood. But is this necessarily? A person can grow up in that environment and think that's normal, that's reasonable, that's what you do. That's something to do with Shabbat somehow. But if a person was brought up and taught, and it was plain that you do netilat yadayim always, and a person decides, I'm just not going to do it. I couldn't be bothered, shall we say? That is mizalzel b'davar echad midivrei sofarim, and it's a very serious thing. Again, the punishment of nidui is, if you think about it for a moment, a very serious thing indeed. Hey, מי ששלחו לו בית דין וקבעו לו זמן ולא בא. This also has to do with the authority and the respect owed to a beit din. A beit din sends you a summons, which you received. You didn't you did not do anything untoward towards the shaliach, the person who brought this to you, but you didn't show up. You decided not to show up. That is bizui beit din, essentially. In English, there's also a term for this, and any reasonable society has to treat such behavior very seriously. In English, it's called contempt of court, for example. Well, מי שלא קיבל עליו את הדין, מנדים אותו עד שייתן. Let's say a person was summoned to the Beit Din and he showed up, but he doesn't like the Psak Din. He thinks that the Beit Din that requires him to pay someone a certain amount of money is wrong. That's called Mishelo Kibel Alawat Hadin. Therefore, then such a person is excommunicated. Minadim Otho Achiten, until he pays up. Then until he pays up, he is placed in Nidui. Rambam discusses this in greater detail. perhaps it's not worth going into the details here, but in Hilchot Malweh Perek Kaf Beth, chapter 22 of Hilchot Malweh, things to do with borrowing money and paying up, etc. Rambam goes into further details. I think we won't want to do that right now. If you wish to look it up later, not a bad idea. All right, so we continue. So we return to Hilchot Talmud Torah, Perek Shishi, Zayin. Yeah, we're in Halacha Yod Heth or Halacha Yod Daled, and in this list we're in Zayin. Zayin says, Mishyesh birshutho davar mazik. He who is in possession of something which causes nezik, harm, or is quite likely to cause harm to the public or to specific individuals. For example, kibon kelev ra or sulam ra'ua menadim otho ad sheyasir hezeko. A kelev ra is a dog that is very aggressive. There are such dogs. I once saw such. I was aware of such a dog. In our yeshuv, in fact, there was one such dog that literally, for absolutely no reason, attacked someone. It was on a leash, but the person, I believe it was a teenage girl, wasn't even able to hold on to it. It was a very powerful and aggressive dog, and it literally leapt and attacked in a very dangerous way a person walking by, and that dog was put down. That's the truth of the matter, because despite without hurting certain people's feelings, human beings are more important than dogs, and I have nothing against dogs, not at all. And many dogs, most dogs, I would think that most people have are fine.
Rabbi,
Yes.
are there any other things that would prevent one from owning a dog if it's not dangerous? Would it be mutar, or would there be some reason not to own a dog even then? For instance, if it barks a lot and has a tendency to terrify people.
That is also a kelev ra, as Rashi mentions over there. Rashi speaks about a kelev ra being such a dog that frightens people. Talks there about frightening a pregnant woman, even causing her to abort or chas v'shalom or something like that. Yes, so a dog that is very aggressive and causes people to be very uneasy anywhere near it. That is also a kelev ra. It doesn't have to be a trained attack dog. Rambam discusses in Hilchot Niskeh Mamon, Perek Hey, here in Perek Hey, you should be able to see it here. Hilchot Niskeh on Perek Hey, Rambam brings a number of things over here. Halacha Gimel, Asara Tanaim Hitna Yoshua Ubeth Dino B'Sha'ah Shehilek Et Haaretz. So there are a number of takanoth. We won't go into all of the takanoth, but a number of ideas that were universally accepted by all Jews in Eretz Yisrael, and they were understood to be very ancient. And one of those things has to do with the dog. It's over here. Just a moment. Yes, it's at the end of the perek. So again, Perek Hilchot Niskeh Mamon, Perek Hamishi, chapter 5, Halacha Tethwa or Teth. Rambam says here as follows. וכן אסרו חכמים לבדל חזירים בכל מקום. It is asur to raise swine in Eretz Yisrael. That's number one. ולא אף הכלב, אלא אם כן היה קשור בשרשרת. In other words, it should not be allowed to roam free in the public domain. אבל מגדל הוא כלבים בעיר הסמוכה לספר. But it is proper and correct. There's no problem at all. In fact, it's advisable to have a dog be'ir, in a place, a town, hasamucha lasafar, that is on, basically, in other words, in the country. Safar is like a border area, an area where there are nasty people in copious supply. You can probably imagine such places. Bayom koshero valayla matiro. So during the day when people are around, he has to be restrained, or he has to be, let's say, within your property, and it has to be fenced so that the dog cannot get out. Uvalayla matiro, but at night, when those evil people are likely to show up, and the dog should be around. And the dog, of course, if it's a fairly a dog that knows, excuse me, a dog that knows its job, shall we say, then hopefully that will deter or act as part of a system of deterrence against such people. ואמרו חכמים ארור לגדל כלבים וחזירים מפני שהחזקן מרובה ומצוי. All right, so that perhaps touches upon your question. In the case of most dogs that most people have, most people raise nowadays as pets, I suspect that many dogs today are not exactly as many dogs were at that time. I think, first of all, by the way, it should be mentioned, a shepherd, without a doubt, needs to have a dog or more than one dog to assist him in his work as a shepherd. So there's no question that our forefathers were shepherds, which they were. They also had dogs. And that's necessary. But the shepherd doesn't walk around the middle of the town with his flock. He's out in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of some unpopulated and uncultivated area. Because in a cultivated area, it's also, you cannot walk around with a flock of sheep or goats. They'll destroy the crops. So there are many situations, first of all, where a dog is necessary. So we said here, makom samuch lasafar, a place that is in an area where there are all kinds of enemies or dangerous people, etc. And Baruch Hashem, there are plenty of such people, and in many parts of the world. Certainly in Eretz Yisrael today, that is the case, until we actually put our house in order. Second of all, I think many dogs today are really, they're domesticated, and they've been bred in such a way that they're very, they're harmless. They would never attack anybody. They never do. I mean, this is the case probably with 98% of dogs kept by people, most normal people nowadays. And that's the opposite of what it says here, because here it says, so if it's a kind of dog that's problematic or likely to be problematic, then yes, then you should not have such a dog. Unless perhaps if you're in a place where it's advisable, as we said before, but I don't think it's a problem nowadays at all to have a dog that is entirely non-threatening and unaggressive towards anyone unless that person is clearly trying to attack them or their master or something like that. So this is an interesting point. I know a person who lived in a certain yeshuv who had this massive German Shepherd, weighed 50 kilo, immense. And he lived in a place where there was good reason to have such a beast patrolling the area around his house, which this dog did. But even this dog, if he saw that his master was on friendly terms with you, which the animals read this in a second from the behavior, the body language, they can see this in one moment. Then the dog has no problem with you at all. The dog is only focused on that which seems threatening to the household, because the dog sees himself as part of the household. So there are also very often very good reasons for having a dog. So it's not something that one can or should simply say. It's not a Jewish thing to have a dog. That's not true. That's not true. And I know there are certain types of Jews, frequently those who are called Haredim, who say having a dog or any animal which is a hayat tame'ah or a behemat tame'ah is asur. There are such people, and I have no idea where they got this idea from, because, as I said before, if you're a shepherd, you most definitely need a dog. And Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair famously rode his donkey, as did everybody else. And if it's not a donkey, it was a horse, etc., etc., or a camel. None of these are behemoth tahoroth. And if you wanted to transport a load, for example, a few sacks of grain from point A to point B, and then you picked up your cell phone and you called the local hamar. The hamar is the guy who owns donkeys for transporting loads. And you paid him his fee, and he took it to the people who ordered 5 sacks of grain down the road. Everybody on the planet worked with animals, including Jews. And if you didn't, then you very likely would not survive at all. It's like people today who claim that human beings should not eat meat, and why not? Because you shouldn't kill animals of any kind. Okay, so I once saw someone who was a maven in the field of agriculture explaining how ridiculous this statement is. He said these people, for example, they're vegans or vegetarians or what have you. So they eat, I don't know, they like avocados. Okay, that's fine, and or kale, or all kinds of products which need to be grown in the ground. Correct? Okay. Well, he said these people, if they knew how many creatures that live underground, are literally ripped to pieces by the farm machinery that plows up the land and rips their habitat and destroys the living animals, whether it's field mice or whether it's all kinds of gophers and I don't know what, and beavers and I don't know, hamsters, I don't know, whatever it might be, rabbits, and 101 other things. It could be snakes, it could be who knows what. If they had any idea how many living creatures needed to die in order that their avocados or kale could be grown on that land, then they would stop eating kale and avocados. Not to mention the fact that these people want to have avocado and kale all year round, despite the fact that they might live in Alaska, for example, and you cannot grow those things in Alaska, so that has to be transported, has to be flown. So how do you fly avocados to far from its place of origin? You do it by plane, and you burn fossil fuels, and you destroy, as it were, the world by so doing. So, I would like to know what exactly we are allowed to consume, but it's simply a fantasy. Yeah, these people are living in an Alice in Wonderland. They have no understanding of how the world works and must work and has always worked. And the same is true here. A person who says that having a cat, by the way, we're talking here about dogs, but as long as we're on the subject, let's talk about cats for a moment. Cats are very useful creatures. If you have a cat that wanders around your property, shall we say, you have a house, you have a garden, you have a courtyard, etc., and you may have a problem with rodents, or you don't want to have a problem with rodents. Well, you can know for a fact that if the cat is, or a number of cats, even stray cats, are wandering around in your area, the likelihood of having rodents in your house or nearby your house drops to a very low statistic, if not zero. I know a person who's in the field of eradicating such creatures, and he told me that what he does himself in his home, where he lives in a certain yishuv. He said anything that's left at the bottom of the pot, any leftovers, he just whatever it is, he just scrapes it puts it into a bowl and puts it outside the door or somewhere on his property. And all the stray cats and all matter of cats come, and they of course will eat. They just consume basically everything. And he said if you do that regularly, you won't have rodents. They just won't be around. They'll be gone. And so cats are very useful creatures. They're not tahor. They're not pure according to that scale and that aspect of reality. They're not hayoth tahoroth, but they're very useful. And there's no reason not to have a cat. And cats don't attack people as a rule. It's very rare that a cat is very aggressive towards human beings. It's a very unusual thing. Maybe some stray cats, but even that is very unlikely. And because they just run away. And so therefore I'm just pointing out that there are many creatures that are not behemoth or hayot tahorot, that are not pure, they're impure. But there's absolutely no reason not to have them around. In fact, they can be very beneficial to human beings. And this has always been the case. So those people who claim that you should not have any such creature in your home, usually these are based on some kind of quasi-Kabbalistic reasoning. This is simply untrue. It's simply untrue. And it's not practical, and it's never been the case. And there's no such halacha. Some people even go further, I'm aware of certain class of people, certain type, or a certain hasidut that will not allow their children to have toys in the shape of any such creature. You can't have a toy dog or a toy cat or a toy camel, whatever. Well, this is this has nothing to do with Torah Judaism. This is la la land. This is not to be taken seriously. The other thing mentioned by Rambam in Seif Zayin of these 24 things was a dangerous, unstable ladder, and the same would apply to anything that is likely to cause harm to people. So it doesn't have to be a ladder. You may ask why, whose business is it if he has a ladder? It's his ladder. If he wants to fall off the ladder, let him do so. Well, first of all, you can't even do that. A person's not allowed to act in a foolish, irresponsible way and cause even himself harm, let alone somebody else. But let's say that people used to have ladders to go up to the second floor of a home. There was no internal staircase. There was an external ladder which you climbed onto, or in the house. It was in the house, but in order to get to the higher floor, the aliyah, you had to go up this ladder. Now it's not. Maybe someone else is going to come visit you, and they'll try to get to your aliyah, and they'll fall down, and they could break their neck, chas v'shalom, or they could break their leg. So these are all serious things, and you can extrapolate from this to many other things. You could even speak about a car, a motor vehicle. If a person has a car which is not properly maintained, it is not only a danger to himself, but is also a danger to others for obvious reasons. I mean, let's say he hasn't maintained the brakes properly, so all of a sudden the brakes fail. We understand, of course, this can endanger or harm in many ways many people. So it's a very serious thing. So such a person is told, if he doesn't have the sechel, the common sense to do it himself, he will be told by the Beit Din or the Chacham or something like that, you have to deal with this problem right now. And if he doesn't, so you see from here that causing hezek, nezek, harm or potential harm to other people is a very serious thing. A Jew is required not to be a source of hezek to other people. Hilchot Nezikin do not only instruct us how much we are required to pay when we did cause nezek to someone, which sometimes is inexorable and unavoidable, but we are told throughout Masechet Nezikin that we are not allowed to cause nezek. We must do our utmost not to cause nezek to anybody. טוב, ח' המוכר קרקע שלו לגוי, מנדים אותו עד שיקבל עליו כל עונש שיבוא מן הגוי לישראל, חברו בעל המסר, או המסר. Here we're talking about, let's say we're talking about a field. There's a Jew who owns a field A, and next to him there's another Jew. So Reuven owns field A, and Shimon owns field B. And Shimon needs to sell his field. He needs the money or whatever it is, or he's had enough of growing kale for the people in California, or whatever it might be. And now he wishes to sell his field. Okay, you have to sell it to a Jew, not to a non-Jew. Why, you might ask? This sounds racist. What have you? No, it's not because of racism. It is because of, and the same would apply, by the way, to a very evil Jew. If a person is known to be like a mafioso, some kind of, thug, and a person who's likely to cause damage and harm to your neighbor, then you cannot sell your home or your field to that person. And the same is true here. The assumption is that this Jew, your neighbor, will suffer in some way. And this is an assumption based on reality, because the Torah is based on in reality and functions within reality, not in some what's the term I'm looking for? Alternate or invented reality. There's another term, but I can't remember it right now. So, sorry, virtual reality, perhaps? Yes, something like that. Yes. So some people would like to run the world and demand that others live according to their virtual or invented or imagined reality. But the Torah doesn't work that way. And it's likely that this action will cause nezek to this other Jew. And by the way, this does not apply only to Eretz Yisrael. It can be anywhere in the world. All right. So, and such a person, if he refuses to, so let's say the Jew tells him, no, I don't want you to sell it to that goy over there. That's really not good for us at all. By all means, sell, but find a Jew, a kosher Jew to sell it to. If he refuses, then the Beit Din can place him in nidui, in herem. Halakha Taith, המעיד על ישראל בערכאות של הגויים, והוצאים ממנו בעדותו ממון שלא כדין ישראל, ונדים אותו עד שישלם. So we have a Jew who, let's say, was let's say it could be a Jew and it could be a non-Jew who claims to have some monetary claim against him, that he owes him money, and he summons him to a non-Jewish court, which functions according to whatever system of law or ideas or principles they have established for themselves, but not according to the Torah, not according to Din Torah, not according to the Halakha. And another Jew goes to that court this non-Jewish court, which does not function according to halacha, and testifies to whatever it may be, which results in the decision being that he owes this other person money. In other words, he's basically caused financial loss to a fellow Jew, not based on Torah law. So it's essentially it's a kind of nezek. It's a kind of hezek that he's causing to this other person.
Would this person
by giving that testimony, yes.
Would this person be like a moser, or is that a different concept?
No, that's not a moser. This is nezek. That's why it's mentioned here, and this is why the punishment is nidui. If he was a moser, then the punishment is whatever needs to be done. So in other words, there the person, what's a moser? A moser would be someone who deliberately snitches on a fellow Jew to the authorities in a matter which he's not allowed to do, because in certain extreme cases a Jew is allowed to do that, but that you have to ask a lot of questions from serious chachamim before you go ahead and do such a thing. But in most cases, it's asur to do that. If he causes a fellow Jew to causes the non-Jewish authorities, or for that matter, Jewish authorities who do not act according to the Torah, to suffer at their hand, even if it's only financial loss, but he initiated that process, then he's a moser. He did this deliberately. Then he's a moser. Yod. Tabah. I'll mark it out here on the screen. Maybe I need to share it with you so you can see that. Tabah kohen. שאינו מפריש המתנות ונותנם לכהן אחר, ונדין אותו עד שייתן. Tabah is a shohet and a butcher. Usually the person who did the shahita, very often, the shohet and the person who sold the meat in the marketplace was the same person, and often was called a tabah. In modern Hebrew, a tabah is a chef, or a person whose job it is to cook. But here we're talking about a tabah kohen. He's a kohen, and he's also the shohet, and he also sells meat, and he does not give the matanoth that are to be the parts of the animal that are to be given to a kohen, which we're talking about the zara, the hayayim, and the qeva. They different parts of the animal which have to be given to a kohen. A person who does not give that to another kohen and keeps it for himself, menadim also ad sheyitin. He can be excommunicated for not doing so, for hoarding it, keeping it all to himself, because he says, I'm a kohen, so why shouldn't I take it? That was not the intention of the Torah, and this is considered reprehensible behavior. Yod Aleph. המחלל יום טוב שני של הגלויות, אף על פי שהוא מנהג. In Chutz La'aretz, where you have Yom Tov Sheni shel Galuyot, everyone is required to keep this Yom Tov Sheni, even though it's midin minhag, as Rambam writes here, or it's considered a minhag in many ways. Nevertheless, not to do so is a serious matter. It's interesting to point out that in Hilchot Kiddush HaHodesh, Perek Hamishi, Rambam uses the lashon of takana, not minhag. He writes with takanat hachamim hi sheyizaharu b'minhag avotehem. So in other words, it was a minhag which was then enacted and made into a takana. So it's a minhag and it's also a takana, which in some ways is more powerful and more binding than a takana. In other words, it was something that the Jews did and understood that was necessary, even before the chachamim gave it a clear legal formulation. And the same would apply to certain other things as well. But Yod Bet, ha'oseh melacha b'erev ha'pesach ha'achar hasoth. Chazal forbade doing any kind of melacha, erev Pesach, Yom Yod Daled Ben Nisan, the fourth, from Chasot Hayom onwards, it's Asur. The first half of the day is a matter of minhag, and it was changed. The minhag was changeable and not fixed, and therefore, in some places, people did malacha in the first half of the day, but not from Chasot onwards. That is Asur, and a person who does not take note of such a thing, or is mezalzel, he doesn't care, he can be put in nidui for that. Hamazkir Shem Shemaim levatara, or lishvu'ah b'divrei havai. A person who mentions Hashem's name, or lishvu'ah b'divrei havai, or in order to impress people, he swears to something which does not require or does it justify any kind of an oath, and using Shem Shemaim, using the name of Hashem, or any name that obviously refers to Hashem in that context, that is Asur, and that is a bizayon. Just as it's Asur levazot Talmidei Chachamim, as we said before, it's obviously Asur levazot et Hashem. And this is a bizui. This is something, it cheapens Hashem, it also cheapens the entire conversation and dialogue, and it's something which has to be punished. A person who causes the many, the public, or part of the public, to do something which is Hilul Hashem. This could, of course, be many, many things. But I'll give you one example. It happened just recently outside a school, I think a high school in Tel Aviv, that a certain person apparently showed up. I don't know if it was outside the school grounds or inside the school grounds. I'm not quite sure, probably outside. And he brought with him a number of pairs of tefillin, and he offered Talmidim, those who were interested. There was no compulsion. If they want to put on tefillin, maybe say Shema Yisrael, something like that. And this was reported in the news just the other day, unfortunately. And the headmaster, the principal of the school, went ballistic, and I don't know exactly what he did. I didn't quite follow all that, but he cursed this person out, and I don't know, he tried to remove him or cause him to distance himself from the school, and I'm not going to stand for this here. Another person, and this was sent to me by someone yesterday, I saw this just a few seconds of some video clip. A woman came along, this was by way of response, and came with ham sandwiches, stood outside in the same place outside, and was offering the students and the passers-by, and also the person who was there with his tefillin, offering them these ham sandwiches. To cause Jews to eat a ham sandwich, and in public, that's clearly an example of causing Hilul Hashem, causing Hamivith Harabim Lidei Hilul Hashem. That's a clear example of such a thing. Tethwa Hamivith Harabim Lidei Achilat Kodashim Bahus. He who causes fellow Jews to eat a korban in an area beyond where it is mutar to do so. So let's say korban Pesach has to be eaten within the walls of Yerushalayim. To cause people to do so outside that area is a sur, and that's something very serious also. The achilat kodashim is a serious matter. The consuming of certain of the meat of certain sacrifices, that is a very serious matter, and justifies nidui if necessary. Ted Zayin. המחשב שנים וקובע חודשים בחוץ לארץ. He who calculates those calculations necessary for the running the maintenance of the Jewish calendar, and therefore calculates and decides when a year should be a leap year, an extra month should be added, or to announce when Rosh Chodesh is. A person who does this in Chutz La'aretz and is told not to do so and does not listen, does not take heed, is put into Nidui, is excommunicated. There's the famous case, which is amongst other places mentioned, the end of Masechet Barachot in Talmud Bavli. That's Hananiah Ahi Rabbi Yoshua, Ben Ahi Rabbi Yoshua. He was from Eretz Yisrael, but he was forced to leave and move to Bavel. And we're talking about a time when there was tremendous oppression by the Roman authorities against the Jews, and it was impossible to gather Chachamim together to discuss such things and to make such announcements. And therefore, he began to do this in Chutz La'aretz, in Bavel. He was Machashev Shanim and Kovea Hadashim. He was Samuch. He had the authority. In other words, he had the knowledge, and he had the status to be able to do this. He was a great Chacham, but he was doing it in Chutz La'aretz. Now, when he did it initially, he was right to do so, because there was no one who could do so in Eretz Yisrael. This be done. But that was a hora'at sha'a. That was a temporary measure. And that's why the Chachamim in Eretz Yisrael, when the situation in Eretz Yisrael normalized somewhat, and they were able to do this in Eretz Yisrael once again, they sent Talmidei Chachamim to him and told him, you must cease and desist what you're doing here in Bavel, in Chutz La'aretz, or we will put you in Harem. And he said, but I did this for the right reason. They said, yes, but now there are once again people in Eretz Yisrael who are able to do so, and therefore you must not do so. This, of course, has everything to do with the centrality of Eretz Yisrael in the Torah, and the authority and the standing of the Beit Din in Eretz Yisrael has to be paramount, has to be protected. Yod Zayin, Hamachshil et Ha'iwer. This does not mean only causing a person who is actually blind, physically blind, to not see that which is in front of him and cause him to fall or harm himself. That's the Iwer, etc., that we find in the Torah. That's the literal meaning, and it's also true. But the Torah also means not to cause others to slip up, spiritually speaking. This can be doing things to encourage people to sin, to act improperly. I think you can probably imagine, without much, you don't need much imagination to understand how guilty many people in the advertising industry are of such things. What they do a lot of the time is clearly Machshilet harabim and ha'iwer. But now, why would you call most people, or many people, iverim, blind? Because they are not aware, or they do not have the ability to stand fast against their more base inclinations. And if they're encouraged by others to do certain things, they're likely to do so. And the people, at least partly responsible, are those people who spread that material, who came up with that advertisement, whatever it might be. He who acts in such a way to prevent many Jews or the public Jewish people from performing a mitzvah which they are required to do. This can be a public mitzvah, in other words, a mitzvah tzibur, or it can be a mitzvah yahid, something which applies to the individual or to the public as a whole. I don't think there's therefore any doubt that on many, many counts and in many cases, the so-called system of justice in this country is guilty of doing precisely that. Furthermore, kaf, I'm sorry, yotef, tabach sheyasaf torefa mitachat yado. Again, tabach is a shochet, a butcher, and if it becomes clear that because of a lack of care, a lack of seriousness regarding his job, behema, there was torefa, there was a surah ba'achila that could not be consumed by Jews, was sold by him. Such meat was sold by him, and therefore he's being machshilat harabim. He is causing the public to sin. Such a person is if it's deliberate and repeated, he's chayav nidui. It shouldn't happen even on one occasion. It's possible, perhaps in certain situations, that such a thing could happen inadvertently, but that's also would be rare. So usually would have to do with not taking the matter seriously. Kaf tabach shelo badak sakino lifnei chacham. A shochet who does not take his knife, his sakin shechita, the knife which he uses for shechita, to a hacham to check, to make sure it's as it should be before he does shechita. And if he's he doesn't even have to be asked to do so, but certainly if he's asked to do so, and he refuses, such a person is chayav nidui. I can relate to you the following true story. Unfortunately, when my family arrived in Auckland, New Zealand, in Tafshin Lamed Aleph, 1971, and there was a person who claimed to be a shochet, and he for those who wanted, not the community was such that there were plenty of people who were not interested, but for those who wanted a kosher chicken, shall we say, he was the shochet. And my father became at that time the Rav of the community, and he asked this person to see his knife, check his knife, have it, see it, and see how he checks his knife, and this shochet refused. My father had no choice but to announce. Again, it was not relevant for all people because it was that kind of community, but it did matter to some. He was forced to announce that you cannot eat this person's shechita, and we did not. All the kosher meat that we received, that we were able to consume for those 5.5 years that we lived in New Zealand, was flown up to us frozen from Wellington, capital city, where there was a real shochet from Israel, and he was a Yehudi Kasher, Yireh Shamayim. I met him a number of times, and that's what we did.
Rabbi,
Yes.
is there a reason why these two previous cases are singled out here? Because they
I'm
seem
sorry,
to be.
I can't hear you properly.
Is this better?
Not sure. Let's try.
Right. Is there a reason why the previous two cases were singled out here on this list? Because they just seem to be uh, specific cases of being, causing the public to sin or something along those lines.
You're right, they are, but these types of issues you see from the fact that these things are listed here. The word tabah appears here for the third time here. You see that these problems were not unknown. They were not uncommon. They were real, and it was so in ancient times as well. It's not a modern malady. It's something which is serious and has to be taken seriously. And if we see it here mentioned here several times, it's something to do with the shohet, with the butcher. There's a good reason for it, because there is always the incentive, financial incentive, for example, to an unscrupulous butcher, shall we say, to buy non-kosher meat and sell it as kosher meat. Usually it's cheaper. His profit margin will be increased, and he's being mashirat harabim. And if you think this did not happen in the ancient past, or 500 years ago, or 50 years ago, or yesterday, then you're mistaken. It happens, and that's why one has to be aware, and that is why the Beth Din has to be very much on guard against such things, and therefore they have to know, to make sure that they actually have a handle on what's going on, and therefore they and that is where the idea, you can see here, you can imagine that the Beit Din, the Chachamim themselves, don't walk around the shuk and enter every butcher shop and put on an apron and decide to ask questions. They send people over, people they know, people who they trust, people who know the halacha, to check these things. That's where you see the concept of hashgacha appears really here in this kind of situation for the first time. And it's necessary. It's very necessary. I remember a case in a certain community in Chutz La'aretz that I became aware of many years ago. It came to light that a certain so-called kosher butcher shop had been selling non-kosher meat for years. You know, he would receive deliveries in the middle of the night through the back door or something, and it was labeled falsely, etc. These things happen, and therefore it's a serious matter. Kaf Aleph. Yes, Kaf Aleph. This refers to a person who deliberately excites himself sexually, deliberately, and of course, and which can only lead to have negative outcomes. And the only time it's correct, of course, is in the right context. When it's in any other situation, it is something fraught with danger, and it is asur. And if a person wants to know, as some people might want to know, why is it asur to view pornography? Well, here's your answer. Because all such things lead a person astray, basically, without belaboring the point right now. And it's a serious matter to the point of being excommunicated even. כ"ב מי שגירש את אשתו ועשה בינו ובינה שותפות או משא ומתן המביאים להם להיזקק זה לזה, כשיבואו שניהם לבית דין מנדים אותם. If a person was once married to a certain woman and then they divorced, but then they continued to have certain dealings together. It could be business dealings. ועשה בינו ובינה שותפות או משא ומתן which means that they have to be in contact with each other frequently. Now, because they were once married, it's more likely that they will be nichshal, they will sin, and therefore they're not allowed to be in such contact. and this his former wife should not be his business partner. And if they do not listen to the Beit Din, they can be put in excommunicated for such behavior, from which you see that you can imagine other types of situations where certain behaviors, certain actions, certain practices would lead to a similar situation where impropriety is quite likely to follow. Such things must be stated clearly. Such things are asur. Again, because the Torah lives in the real world, not in the virtual reality that certain people have created for themselves, which of course does not work. So, for example, if you have everybody knows, if you have an executive who works late at night at the office when everyone's gone home and his pretty young secretary is there with him, and they're alone, well, no one, and not to mention how she's probably dressed, then no one should be surprised at various outcomes. Or even that he makes a remark to her, which some people today will call they'll say it's harassment, or they'll say this, or they'll say that, but this all has to do with denying reality. Reality is that there is powerful sexual attraction between men and women. That is how it should be, but it also has to be channeled and directed, and all such things have to, and society has to be organized in such a way. Excuse me. Such things have to be organized in such a way that impropriety will not take place. And of course, it's possible. And as Rambam writes in Hilchot, the most obvious cause of all manner of sin in these regards is yihud. If they're not alone together, it's not going to happen. Correct? Simple. And that's real. That's the real world. That is how human society should operate. And if it doesn't operate that way, then no one should be surprised at the outcomes. Kaf Gimel, Chacham sheshmu'atho ra'a. We're talking about a Chacham, Tamid Chachamim, about whom there are rumors, repeated rumors that apparently are impossible to ignore, that he has sinned in various sexual matters. So such a Chacham, even though we haven't received conclusive proof of this, if the stories about this person are impossible to ignore, then that person is placed in cherem, in nidui. Kaf Daled, the last one. Hamenadeh mishe'eno hayav nidui. Of course, precisely because this is such a powerful weapon and tool and a threat against people. In other words, excommunication. To excommunicate someone who should not be excommunicated is itself a terrible crime. And therefore, Hamenadeh mishe'eno hayav nidui is hayav nidui also. So we shall stop here for today. Hayu beruchim. Hizku ve'emes levavchem kol ha'meyacharim l'Adonai. Shalom v'nitzachon.
Thank you, Rabbi Bar-Hayim. We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. We would also like to suggest the following opportunity to our viewers. If you identify with Rabbi Bar-Hayim's message and would like to sponsor or dedicate a video interview with the rabbi in honor or memory of a loved one, if you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.